you can't go around policing all of social media. I just think that television is a much better platform to talk about weather forecasts.
Brian Martin, FuturisticHub, is being sued.
What's going on, everyone? I just wanted to announce a class action lawsuit.
I'm the co-owner of CashGateUniversity.com.
And his twin brother.
Yeah, I'm Kevin. Identify yourself.
Cover up the pace. You can't run the race. The pace is too fast. You just won't last.
You will leave me alone, period. If you don't leave me alone, you will see me very soon.
FuturisticHub, one of the strangest channels on YouTube, run by one of the strangest men to ever use the platform. In my last video on this subject, I covered the decade-long history of the eccentric Brian Martin, a pathological liar who attempts to silence critics by any means necessary. Both virtue and legality be damned. I discussed how the frivolous litigant became the defendant of a $20 million lawsuit himself, and was found guilty as a result of fraudulent activity. In spite of all that, this iceberg still hasn't quite been fully unveiled yet. And, with Brian himself now responding to the video, the story is only getting more convoluted. So grab yourself a snack, boys and girls, as we dive back into the world of FuturisticHub. There was no way that Brian would ignore the series. This is a man who felt it necessary to personally threaten a YouTuber with only a few thousand subscribers. When I published my first video, I expected shenanigans to ensue, and sure enough, they did. I had preemptively blocked the Wildcraft account on Twitter in preparation for the fallout. This didn't stop them, however, as they instead began messaging people I followed in order to get into contact with me. Eventually, I decided to just give in and see what would happen. As expected, I was met with messages informing me the couple had emailed YouTube requesting that my account be deleted. Simultaneously, I received an email notifying that I'd received a privacy complaint for the video. Included was a list of timestamps of the alleged offenses, which wound up being any time I had mentioned Brian Martin by name. It's evident that in spite of the overwhelming amount of evidence proving that Brian owns the FuturisticHub channel, he is somehow convinced that he can make a court believe he was never the owner. Around the same time that this was happening, Tommy C also started receiving emails from burner accounts with rather explicit usernames. While I can't say for sure if these were from Brian, it definitely sounds like something he would say. And let's be real, who else would be so adamant on defending the brand? I was also, predictably, met with threats of a lawsuit for supposed defamation, which they also levied against creators talking about the situation, such as Tipster and Tommy C. Many were quick to call their bluff, though interestingly, they attempted to substantiate their threat this time. People who think I actually didn't sue are stupid. What the hell do you call this? A cursory glance of the attached documents revealed them to indeed be from an actual suit that Holly had filed, which definitely caught me off guard, but upon reading the facts of the case, it was nothing like how they had framed it. The nature of this case is in regards to copyright, not defamation, and it turned out to actually be quite a useful insight for their historical revisionism. One of the unanswered questions in the first video was in regards to why they were so adamant on denying that Brian owned the channel. Brian claimed that he'd only been the manager, and it was actually created by his wife Holly.
What does she do on YouTube?
He's the owner of FuturisticHub.
Is she now?
Yes.
When did she become the owner of FuturisticHub?
She's always been the owner of FuturisticHub. Always, she's 20 years old.
This was despite an overwhelming back catalog of evidence suggesting otherwise. I posited that it could have been due to Brian's previous lifetime bans from the site, but if that were the case, he likely would have done this years ago. His defensiveness from this claim is a new phenomenon. It also gave little explanation to the creation of their secret alternative account, Wildcraft, which they used to have mental breakdowns against those who didn't believe them. Well, all of this suddenly made sense upon revelations from within the lawsuit. YouTube is Brian's main source of income, generating him thousands of dollars a month in ad revenue. Despite this, Brian refused to pay the plaintiffs of the video game's case. As a result, a turnover order was filed to confiscate both the FuturisticHub channel as well as the one titled Creamworks Animations. It must have been executed sometime around December of 2020, as that's when the channels stopped uploading simultaneously. Less than a month later, a video was uploaded to a channel called FuturisticHubs, in which Brian begs his audience to follow him to the Wildcraft channel.
Hey everyone, it's me, Steve. And guess what? We're moving to a new home. Come join me and my friends over at Wildcraft for some more amazing adventures. Catchy name, huh?
Complying with the court's orders, YouTube allegedly took $300,000 of revenue from the channel's AdSense and deposited it into the registry of the court. That is what Holly's lawsuit is actually about. It's all a Hail Mary to get their source of income back. Their legal argument is that Holly has been operating the channel for the past 10 years. This would include the infamous Minecraft sex videos, which she was adamant on specifying to me that she had created. She claims to have created the channel while she was 13, and that Brian was simply a special person in her life who sometimes voiced characters. Let's ignore the years of evidence of Brian claiming credit over the channel, including once while under oath. Let's even ignore the several public instances of Holly referring to Brian as a separate individual on a separate channel. The Wildcraft channel was not created specifically for Brian to use. In fact, Holly had been using it before she'd even met him. And what's interesting is that she does create animations herself, which is likely why they feel so confident in their fabrications. It probably looks good at face value, especially when presented in front of out-of-touch boomers. However, apart from obvious quality differences, Holly has publicly stated that she uses a software known as Minimator. It is simply impossible to create the videos seen on FuturisticHub using that program due to how primitive it is. She would have to be using Source Filmmaker, which is the program that Brian uses. This case is actually yet to be resolved in the courts, though given that they're suing the same individuals who won the video game suit, I'm willing to believe the defendants' lawyers are not incompetent. I'm certain they're going to pick up these discrepancies and present them in court. Regardless, it's worth pointing out that none of this has anything to do with defamation, so their threats to add me and other YouTubers to the case make absolutely no sense. Brandon Talks is a YouTuber from a long time past. He's someone who was acquaintances with Brian in his early days on the site, his life in a tent. 2 days after the release of my video, Brian agreed to appear on Brandon's podcast, which I was eagerly anticipating, as he declined my own request for an interview. However, the following morning, I was informed that Brian had backed out and claimed he'd be telling the court that I'd been instructed to make the video in order to harass him. You and Brandon are feeding bullshit to that kid who just made that video. Do you want a channel anymore? I took down so many channels, I can't even fucking count it. Fuck you, faggot ass piece of shit. This is an accusation made by the Wildcraft Twitter in the messages as well, claiming I'm harassing them, and once again threatening me with a lawsuit. To put it simply, I'm not afraid of them. He's threatened critics with the same song and dance over and over again, and there's never any follow-up to it. So, it's bullshit. What is not bullshit is the fact that FuturisticHub seems to have a very easy time getting videos taken down. A few people have speculated that Brian has some kind of contact at YouTube, which makes it easier for him to get critical videos removed. This was even alluded to in my conversation with a Wildcraft account. If I had to guess, this is due to Brian's decade-long history on the platform, as he may have formed some long-standing business connections, despite the fact that his complaints are obviously fraudulent, given they reference videos containing only already public information, which he posted. YouTube ignores this and takes down videos regardless, and when the system fails, little can be done other than get upset at them on Twitter to try and get their attention, a process which has been extremely hit or miss in the past. One of the last messages I got from the account was tauntingly stating that I didn't have to worry about my address or name being leaked, because Brian already had it. He was explicitly threatening me with my docs, an attempt to scare me, something which I knew he wasn't above doing in the past. It does beg the question though, did he actually have my personal information? At first, I presumed the worst, but then I started to realize a few interesting details. Towards the beginning of our messages, he refers to me as Edwin, and at a later point, he claims that my surname is Berg. Well, my name is not Edwin, and my last name certainly is not Berg. So why was he referring to me as such? Well, it starts to add up when you look at my Twitter handle. On Twitter, I use the handle of a somewhat forgotten creator known as Zaptai, which has often led to a lot of confusion, even among creators like Leafy. Watch my video about it. Well, at the end of one of his videos, Zaptai credits himself by his real name, Edwin Berg. Brian Martin thinks that I'm Zaptai. I don't really have much else to say other than that it's pretty funny. It shows his incompetence, and I hope it doesn't force Edwin to come out of retirement early. Sorry about that, man. Shortly after the video was released, Kiwi Farms also began talking about Brian. A thread was started to follow the aforementioned lawsuit as they sifted through the various documents Holly posted to Twitter. One of the more curious developments was when a new user, called Orion666, began commenting on the thread. They left an extremely long response, the length of an actual college paper, adamantly defending Holly as not the owner of the channel. It was obviously speculated in the replies that this was just Brian, and they teased him for it. But is there any validity to this claim? It definitely seems like something that he would do, and some of the things this poster says absolutely seem out of place for someone who's just a casual supporter of the couple. For example, in one post, they claim that it makes more sense for Holly to have run the channel because she's autistic. Holly said publicly she is autistic, so I'm not going to poke fun at that because that is wrong. But the work Holly does looks exactly like what a young autistic person would make. I also think it's not far-fetched that Holly would make Minecraft sexual content when she was a teen, and think it's funny because she's autistic, and that's normal for them. The poster also says that they have faith in her lawyers for some reason, giving props to my video, but stating everything about Holly was incorrect. I am confident that her lawyer has actual evidence to Holly's claims, and that is why her lawyer and Holly filed a huge lawsuit and sued Google and YouTube. Did you see the lawsuit? That's a risk, and I don't think Holly and her lawyer would risk their lives against Google if the facts of their side were not true. In conclusion, I think Jerky Tom in his video was good on Brian's side, but when talking about Holly, who is the owner of her Minecraft animation channel FuturisticHub, I think it is wrong to assume anything until the case is done. Calling Holly a puppet is extraordinarily irresponsible of you. She has rights just like you and just like me. I'm convinced that Holly is the owner and that she and her lawyer will ultimately win these cases. It all just seems strange for someone on the outside to say, doesn't it? They almost read as legal defenses and justifications for glaring discrepancies in their story. This person also seems to know who Holly's lawyer is and explicitly praises him for being a professor at Harvard Law. They know the inner workings of that which is yet to be concluded and received little to no media attention prior. Hell, some of what they said is extremely similar to what they said to me in private. Due to their compliance with the turnover order, Google and YouTube were added to the case as defendants, citing violations of property rights. Both the Wildcraft account and the Kiwi Farms poster reference the company's involvement as if it adds validity to their case, reasoning that they wouldn't sue a company as big as Google if they weren't certain that they would win. If this isn't Brian or Holly, then it must be someone who uses the exact same arguments as them and knows intricate details of the case, just like them. So, it's probably Brian. That about covers it for the developments that directly followed my video. Brian continues to ensure his history of public outbursts, frivolous litigation, and threats will not end anytime soon, despite how harrowing it must be knowing that he will likely be in debt for the rest of his life. But if you'll recall, I ended the last video revealing that I'd only discussed a portion of Brian's past, revealing that throughout all of this, he's had a sibling responsible for many of the same crimes that Brian has done. Well, it's about time that that story is told. I'd like to finally introduce you to Kevin Martin, FuturisticHub's twin brother. It may seem bizarre that up until this point, Kevin's name has escaped the narrative. That's because the two grew apart as Brian further entrenched himself in YouTube drama. However, prior to that, they'd more or less been partners in crime, taking part in various business ventures together. Most of the community's first exposure to Kevin was while investigating the cash gift scam covered in the previous video. One of Brian's sites advertising the scheme dubbed them as the Cash Gifting Twins, with its contact page once embedding photos of the snake oil siblings. But very few people bothered to investigate him any further due to his sheer lack of a presence, and what they missed is that Kevin's behavior in other communities was near identical to that of his brothers. While Brian found his niche in YouTube content creation, fighting to rein the algorithm and intimidate its direction, Kevin decided to seek control in a field far more worldly. Kevin attempted to dominate the weather. While nowadays, sites attempt to regulate the spread of misinformation using algorithms, back in the day, the internet was a wild west. It was often difficult to discern the truth from fiction, as misinformation was presented as fact and vice versa. This is a perfect segue into Kevin's career as a weatherman. Launched in 2001, Kevin became notorious for managing what he purported to be a forecasting site called the Ontario Weather Service. Despite having no legitimate background in the field, of which a degree requires a minimum of 4 years in secondary education, he titled himself the organization's senior meteorologist.
But right now I want to turn your attention to the Santa Ana wind event. Now if you're in the Los Angeles and Orange County coastal areas and basin, blah blah, you won't see any winds. It's the Santa Ana wind.
Using his own personal methodology, Kevin would publish readings of weather he expected to fall upon the California residents, which ranged from upcoming storms to chemtrails. Yes, he prided himself on being one of the only meteorologists to believe chemtrails existed. He expanded his endeavor with additional sites such as the Southern California Weather Authority and the Weather Space. For someone claiming to be an authority, there surely must be some insight to his technique. Unfortunately, no one knows exactly what his methodology is. In fact, on his Facebook page dedicated specifically to chemtrails, he demands people asking just that, writing, "Do not ask how. We keep our algorithms to to the project. We provide the image and reserve the right to not publicly disclose our core of the project. As you may expect, Kevin's efforts also entailed a healthy dose of antagonizing the government. Kevin held great contempt for the HAARP, a United States military project dedicated to analyzing the atmosphere for the purpose of communication and surveillance. Kevin speculated, however, that the true purpose of HAARP was to control the weather around the world, often noting on his website his suspicions of unnaturally large storms, instead being the result of the US military. This included his positing that 2012's Hurricane Sandy had been made by the government. In 2007, Kevin even wrote on a local forum that he would be declaring war on the National Weather Service. We are sick of the National Weather Service missing forecasts. We will issue warnings / watches / advisories when we see it. We will not listen to anyone that tells us not to, even if the government gets in the way. This will be the biggest story in meteorological history. We are against them, and we are putting our foot down for the last time. We would like a news story on this. I will come down and do one if possible. We will not stop until we show the public the right and true forecast for them. We are here for the people, not a paycheck like the NWS. I am serious when I say this. We will not stand for the NWS offices anymore. 4 years later, he would become so prolific amongst the community that the National Weather Service would have to issue a public statement disavowing his alternative forecasts. Being so notorious that the government has to issue a warning about you is no easy feat, especially in a field you would expect to be free of such petty drama. It leads one to wonder what exactly led him to be so infamous. Well, it turns out the journey to that point is filled with a lot of rocky waters. In the summer of 2010, an anonymous blog was created dedicated entirely to exposing Kevin's fraudulent activity and bizarre behavior. The first post on the site was published on the 1st of August and reads, "Self-proclaimed meteorologist Kevin Martin is known to most as a person they believe to be a complete mental case. He is well known for his fraudulent weather websites where he pretends that he is a storm chaser, but in fact, he is simply a nasty little plagiarizing weather content and weather theory stealing photo thief. Most of his forum accounts you will find have been banned, locked out, or in many cases removed, because they always ended the same way. He has threatened to kill nearly anyone who has ever called him out on his plagiarism, theft, and other actions, and then, after a while, self-proclaimed meteorologist Kevin Martin claims he was just mentally ill or off his meds. Everywhere that self-proclaimed meteorologist Kevin Martin goes on the internet, he leaves such a trail of forum destruction and some terror. If you want to know the truth about this plagiaristic terrorist, also known as self-proclaimed meteorologist Kevin Martin, then be sure to stay tuned. It seems that although his method of forecast is a mystery, his handling of critics remains very familiar. They allege that under pressure, Kevin will use a plethora of alt accounts to defend himself in the third person, before threatening to snap the neck of his opposition. The next day, the author detailed an incident in which Kevin was caught literally stealing the thunder of another storm chaser. Upon confrontation, he decided to publish a hit piece about the person who approached him, claiming them to be a storm chaser bully. The article was supposedly written by an employee named Cameron Venable. Kevin then began commenting on his own article using the names of actual established meteorologists to bolster his credibility. While claiming to be Danny Neal, he writes, "I have been chasing for many years now, and Kevin has been the greatest help for me with his forecasting skills. I have caught numerous tornadoes with his forecasting skills. We didn't always see eye to eye, but he turned out to be a great guy. Kevin is one of the smartest people I've known in forecasting storms. His long range and hurricane forecasting is unbeatable. My fellow chasers just do not get the hint to leave this man alone." Upon reading these posts, the actual Danny Neal was not pleased. He contacted Kevin through his Facebook account asking him to remove the comments left under his name. But rather than comply, Kevin instead responded with a multi-paragraph unhinged rant declaring war on the entire community. "Your name will not be removed. I didn't even put it there, and I will not be removing it. Take this formal letter to the chaser community, and don't give me that cease and desist garbage. I don't listen to shits like you that talk like that." He goes on to state that because of the blog's established documenting of his behavior, he would be waging war against them all. Reasoning that he couldn't do anything legally due to the First Amendment, he avowed to do whatever he could to put the entire community in danger. The entire chaser community is in danger. Their work will be taken, sold, profited, what have you. Justice will be served, and if these sites are not taken down, this war will only get worse. I am in a direct war against the chaser community, and half of you are lucky that I do not live out there, or I'd take this with fists and beatdowns into the field. And trust me, a guy like me you don't mess with. So this is a direct war on the chaser community. If you do not want any part of this war, please email me and please your case on why you should not be a target. A chaser wrote that these two blogs and chasers are a family, and chasers will pay for what I've lost. Money and sanity over the years because of this. You don't screw with the mind of a mentally such as myself. This is dangerous to both the offenders and to myself. You do not play with a loaded gun because in the end, that gun will fire back at you. Take this now, Danny. Take it and spread the word to all chasers. This is war. In response, Danny wrote, "Go fuck yourself, Kevin. You have 24 hours. I am not involved with that. I don't care. You used my name, illegal impersonation charges will be filed. I bet you had no idea I was a government employee, did you?" To which Kevin replied, "Okay, Danny, I do respect where you're coming from. Can you prove you work for the government? If so, I will remove it." Not. Lol. The conversation goes back and forth for a while, ending with Danny continuing to threaten legal action and Kevin explaining, "I am the great, known, powerful Kevin Martin. Know that name well. It'll haunt you for the rest of your pathetic life." Kevin would indeed make waves throughout the community when he was caught flat out fabricating materials for the site. In 2010, Kevin created images and a video of a supposed UFO spiral, initially claiming to have been witnessed in Canada. After being thoroughly debunked, Martin attempted to save face, claiming a reporter named Betty Morgan had accidentally posted graphic test files. When even this didn't help him to save face, he then told an entirely different story, in which he supposedly engineered the hoax to gauge the most gullible demographics. Eventually, his final response was to claim that he had indeed seen a UFO, but he was advised to not speak of it.
Now, an interesting thing on the story is that Martin retracted. He's saying he was told to keep quiet by an unknown visitor to his residence yesterday afternoon, and that he no longer wanted to be included in this UFO sighting over Western Canada.
The blatant falsification and subsequent ass covering leads one to question just how genuine his convictions of chemtrails and other intuitive forecasting are. And that line of questioning can be taken even further. Given his propensity for lying, there's much debate over whether or not Kevin's employees ever even existed. Names such as Cameron, Betty, and Scott are regarded as little more than pseudonyms for the serial impersonator. However, we can be sure of at least one individual being real. That is a teenager named Ricky Lukacs, who he'd brought onto his project as a lead forecaster. In 2009, Ricky was charged with 10 counts of arson after allegedly having started large wildfires in his local area. Kevin attempted to defend his employee, claiming that he had sent them to those fires in order to take photographs. He told law enforcement that he just reports weather and is really obsessed with taking pictures of weather. As the trial continued, however, the teen eventually confessed to having ignited the flames. Following his declaration of war against everyone else in the field, as well as his antagonization of government-employed individuals, it's perhaps no longer surprising that it took only a year after the blog was launched for the National Weather Service to issue a statement regarding his activity. They said, "The National Weather Service has no association with the Southern California Authority or with Mr. Kevin Martin or any other staff of the Southern California Weather Authority. Department of Commerce security officials have advised the National Weather Service to disassociate the organization and immediately cease any professional contacts with Mr. Kevin Martin and his web pages and social media applications. The reason for the prohibited access involves both physical security for the NWS and our employees and public safety considerations. Mr. Martin's previous web postings have been interpreted by federal authorities as threatening. In spite of their warning and active attempts to disassociate with Kevin, this did little to stop him. He not only continued operating his sites in the years following, but the drama surrounding him actually escalated as he continued waging war against the chaser community. It only gets worse from here, and really it was definitely not helped by, and instead definitely worsened by the re-involvement of Brian into his various schemes. It really does take two. While I've so far covered their lives separately, the online presences of Kevin and Brian Martin have been intertwined since the turn of the millennium. The weather space may be Kevin's website, but whenever he got into trouble, his brother was always there to help him out, and vice versa. As mentioned in the last video, Brian's channel Life in a Tent was terminated from YouTube due to several severe violations of the community guidelines. His misleading videos were wreaking havoc on people's recommended pages. He and his girlfriend were threatening fellow creators, and evidence has resurfaced showing Brian has intentionally manipulated site metrics. Actions being taken against the two were inevitable, but that didn't make it easier for them to accept when it happened. In a now deleted video, Kevin went so far as to make direct threats to the company for deleting his brother's channel.
You know, my face is right here, and you're going to see my face very shortly, in fact.
Next week, if you do not give exactly why you terminated him, I and him, especially me, will be showing up at your office in Palo Alto. You realize how pissed off I am, and you realize exactly what I will do to you if you do not first and foremost, get rid of the slander blogs and even tell us what happened.
Their arguments with weather organizations were just the beginning, and this propensity for threats eventually also got them into some serious legal trouble. In 2014, Kevin received coverage from Gawker in an article that detailed his eccentric lifestyle. But his questionable occupation was not their primary focus. Instead, their attention was snagged by the tantrum he'd thrown after a series of social media terminations. His organization's Facebook pages, as well as the accounts of those administering it, were all deleted. With all of these accounts having a cumulative of 100,000 likes, Brian was furious, demanding that they be reinstated for a refund of all the money he'd paid to have them promoted. As he'd done many times before, Kevin then began threatening Facebook, stating that he would personally travel to their head offices in order to confront them about their deletion. Of course, most took this as an empty threat. The prospect of traveling to the company's headquarters seemed unimaginable to the rational mind. But Kevin is not a rational person, and against all expectations, he actually followed through. Naturally, things didn't go as planned. While the exact details of the confrontation were lost to time, a few key events are known. Upon arriving at the headquarters, Kevin was removed from the building by local police, who had been warned that he was plotting an attack. Undeterred, following his physical removal from the campus, he stood outside the building with a megaphone and screamed at them. But companies weren't the only people that the twins wanted to threaten into submission. Facebook is obviously an unrealistic target, so how about the individual people who didn't agree with their antics? Aaron Tuttle is a meteorologist residing in Oklahoma City. Being fully aware of the existence of Kevin Martin, he called him a nutjob and a fake meteorologist who merely pretended to be a professional. In exchange, Brian decided to create a fake website calling Aaron a child molester. When the Rational Wiki attempted to document some of what Kevin had done, he attempted to pressure the website into taking it down, including making threats that they will slander them. If this is not taken care of, we will put out an article with libelous stuff about it on your company, including hosting child pornography. We are connected to Google News at theweatherspace.com, and we will most certainly make your site a living nightmare for not listening to us. You are to remove what we tell you. And I am the CEO of the company, and I have that power to publish a libelous article about your site. We will accuse all staff members of child pornography, and it will go on the top search engines for your site. We will further encourage all to not associate and or donate to your site. Do you really want to start a war with me, son? When they didn't remove the article, Kevin created a page on his website, weatherspace.com, where he hosted a fake article about the admin being investigated for possession of CP. So, you fucked up. I told you to remove the page Kevin Martin. If it is not removed, this will not be removed. In 10 minutes, it will be on Google searches and Google News. Do the right thing or I'll destroy you. Is it worth it? No, it shouldn't be if I'm going to destroy you. The author of the aforementioned Gawker article was responsible for a large amount of coverage at the time about Kevin's various escapades. As a result, he also includes an account of his own experiences with the brothers, showcasing threats Brian had sent him in an attempt to intimidate him from talking about Kevin any further. Read my comment, you stupid motherfucker. If you don't want to get fucked up, I suggest you never defame Kevin's character again. Following its publishing, Kevin attempted to have him fired by emailing Gawker's legal department claiming the article had been plagiarized from him. Their lawyers called his bluff, to which he left the following message in their voicemail. You're such a fucking bitch. Fucking cunt. I don't even know. I would call you every fucking name in the book. Yeah, this is Kevin again. I'm gonna let you know that what you sent that says you're not wrong in any way, in any facts, no. You guys will fucking remove scam. You'll fucking remove fraud. And you'll fucking remove the hoax bullshit. You will fucking remove that shit, or you're gonna have me on your fucking ass. You got me? This was also in line with his other threats to journalists, such as, all of the staff at Weatherbrains are in mortal danger. You don't just pick on people and think you can breathe. But by far the biggest target of these threats was his oldest enemy, the National Weather Service. Following their issuing of public disavowal, Kevin attempted to file handwritten litigation against them, to no avail. Enraged, he began using a variety of sock accounts to threaten their San Diego office and its employees. This included drawing crosshairs over photos of their office with ominous captions such as "Endanger the public" and "I endanger you." These threats were swiftly reported to law enforcement, who began investigating his threats against the agency. They found them of reasonable enough concern to send 2 FBI agents to visit Kevin, who had Brian film the interaction and post it online.
You're going to be recorded. Okay. You want to come
on
in
our property?
Stay out here.
Actually, I'd like to talk to you, but I prefer not to be videotaped.
No, you're going to be videotaped. You're on my property.
Yeah.
That's my right.
All right.
Sorry.
Well, then you want to go to my office and talk?
I'm going to go to your office and talk. Either you're going to come inside or you're going to get videotaped.
He has rights.
Yeah, I got
He didn't do
rights.
anything wrong.
Exactly why you're here.
All right, why am I here?
Because of what happened on the Facebook page. Exactly, and I know I didn't say anything incriminating at all.
It shouldn't even need to be said at this point, but these are clearly the actions of an extremely unstable individual, which given the actions of his brother, I suppose this was all somewhat predictable. And that is really where Kevin's story ends, with his antics calming down over the years. He did make the news 2 years ago, though not for anything he did himself. He was reportedly beaten for his striking resemblance to a police sketch of a local child molester. He first learned of his other lookalike after being messaged by followers, recounting them stating, "Kevin, that looks exactly like you." The incident took place less than a mile away from his house, making him extremely concerned over the growing confusion. He called law enforcement, causing 2 detectives to visit his house and question him. He was conclusively ruled out as a suspect, though unfortunately it seems this did not save him from the beating. And in spite of everything, that does suck, and I do feel sorry for him. With a somewhat somber end note for Kevin, perhaps it's time to shift focus back to where this all began. Brian Martin and his conspiracy to obfuscate the origins of FuturisticHub. So far, I've covered his attempts to pin his degenerate animations on his partner and subsequent legal filings, but there's an entirely different angle to this ordeal which we have yet to discuss at all, in which Brian's antics have possibly led to a corporation being blacklisted by YouTube entirely. The first lead in this case comes from a comment by a Kiwi user. They claim to have once been an insider to the YouTube industry, and thus are well aware of Brian Martin. They state that everyone he knew seemed to have a personal horror story with the guy, which isn't surprising. What was surprising, however, was the allegation which they would go on to make. On the same note, the amount he cares about not being Brian Martin / Life in a Tent is heavily derived from how he thinks you feel about Life in a Tent. YouTube's lawyer said it relatively plainly in the affidavit from the Freedom Network, whose relationship with YouTube was terminated over this affair. Whether Freedom believed the Holly facade is utterly irrelevant. I have seen the way he reached out to other MCNs and can tell that it was a reasonably obvious LARP, but they probably assumed he was LARPing for taxes or something. The business conversations I have seen of the Holly fiction essentially match the public ED ones of the Vince character. I do not think Holly was involved with any of the dodgy YouTube dealings. Supposedly, Brian managed to get an entire YouTube-related business shut down, which, frankly, if true, is entirely out of left field. But how could he have even accomplished this? And what exactly is the Freedom Network? Freedom MCN is, or was, a multi-channel network. In the past, these types of businesses garnered a negative reputation for effectively being parasites, not providing much to the creators that they signed while taking a massive cut from their ad revenue. However, that's not especially relevant, as Freedom seems to have maintained one of the better standing reputations amongst its peers. In fact, it's actually one of the few that's managed to stick around since the platform's partner program began. On March 5th, YouTube announced both publicly and through emails that it would no longer be working with Freedom MCN. They terminated their partnership with the network, citing multiple severe violations of YouTube's terms of service. Given their long-standing business relationship and reputable status, what could Freedom have done to be punished so severely? Well, it turns out that the answer to that can be found in the court documents from Holly's case, as previously referenced in the Kiwi post. I mentioned before that in late 2020, the FuturisticHub account was confiscated following a turnover order. Investigating the channel a little further will reveal that many of its videos are not available to be watched. Their pages instead give notice that the videos are being claimed by Moss v. Martin. Well, according to the suit, the channel was transferred to the Freedom Network in 2019. According to a court video from the time, Brian and Holly's lawyer makes an interesting statement. He says that they received an affidavit from the man who ran Freedom after its termination by Google. He states that Freedom had attempted to return Holly's copyrighted material to her via the copyright system, and as a result, Google was forced to sever ties with the network at risk of being held in contempt of the court.
Freedom Family LLC, which Google has terminated because of actions in this case. He was trying to get Holly's copyrighted material to her. Google said, "You have, you're putting us in danger of being held in contempt," which I think is unlikely, and they cut him off completely. It's a business he valued about $120 million. It no longer exists.
Suddenly, the pieces start to come together. It is very likely that either Brian or Holly, or Brian disguised as Holly, reached out to the Freedom Network to get his own videos claimed. When Google realized that this would interfere with a court case, they cut them off. The Freedom business, therefore, is ruined. A business valued at an estimated $120 million down the fucking drain. And so, Freedom becomes the most recent victim in Brian's long history of deceptive practices, while simultaneously jeopardizing the contracts of all of their clients. Even in debt, he somehow finds a way to screw other people over. It's very likely that Brian will attempt to take down this video in the following days or weeks. The fact that part 1 is still up is sort of an anomaly considering Brian's history. I really didn't think that it would still be online even weeks after its release. In the past, he's been extremely effective with privacy complaints. I'm thankful that part 1 has managed to stay up for now. I'm sure he's having lots of sleepless nights over it. If this is how he responded to a high school kid making videos about him, then I can't imagine what a video with a few 100,000 views, which also serves as a comprehensive history of his life, will do to his fragile ego. Whether or not anything else will happen to Brian Martin in the next few years is unknown. He was recently found in contempt of the court on 3 separate counts, so I wouldn't be surprised if his legal troubles only get worse from here.
So, look, I'm not a lawyer, keep in mind. They're talking about the State Department. My guess, and take this with a grain of salt, my guess is because Futuristic Hub now apparently took off to England, the State Department would have to be involved for, I don't know, either getting him or getting that stuff transferred.
But sadly, this may not have a super happy ending anytime soon. As mentioned before, Brian is currently evading the consequences of the lawsuit by living in England, refusing to come to the United States and pay for what he did with the video games channel. It is inconclusive for now whether or not he will give any money to the plaintiffs, as he seems to be doing everything in his power not to. At least I can take solace in the fact that if there were any doubts that he was the insane pathological liar that he was shown to be in part 1, those doubts would now be shed away. I went into this knowing he would probably do something stupid. I absolutely never expected him to incriminate himself by threatening to dox me. I would say on that note that my job here is done. Thanks for watching. I've been Turkey Tom, and until next time, leave me alone.